Breaking news is hitting Washington tonight, just hours after US forces moved to tighten pressure on Venezuela in the Caribbean. An unexpected military incident unfolded in the dark skies to the south. At 2:17 a.m., radar screens inside Venezuela's Barcelona airbase suddenly lit up. One unknown aircraft appeared out of nowhere. No transponder signal, no identification response. It was already above 55,000 feet, moving fast, steady, and silent, coming straight in from the north over the Gulf of Venezuela. This was not a civilian plane. This was not a navigation mistake. Inside the control room, alarms sounded. Controllers leaned closer to their screens. The track was clean and deliberate. Instead of turning away, the aircraft held its course, closing distance toward an area where US naval patrols were operating in international waters. Within minutes, 2 Venezuelan Su-30 fighters were ordered into the air. Engines roared, emergency lights flashed. In Caracas, senior defense officials were pulled out of bed as reports stacked up fast. Radar operators watched the range numbers drop. The air felt tight. Everyone knew the rules. Identify, shadow, do not fire unless threatened. But they also knew how quickly situations like this can spiral. This was not a coincidence. It looked like a challenge, sent in the most dangerous way possible, at night, when reaction time is thin and mistakes are costly. Whoever was behind that aircraft believed the US would hesitate. They had no idea what kind of response they were about to trigger. If you want to follow this confrontation step by step as it unfolds, subscribe now and tell me in the comments. Press 1 if the US should hold the line, or 9 if Venezuela was right to scramble. This moment matters because of where it happened and who was involved. The Gulf of Venezuela is not empty space. It is one of the tightest air and sea corridors in the region. Radar stations watch it around the clock. Patrol routes cross here every day. Any aircraft flying high over this area can see far, listen far, and interfere far. That is why this flight was dangerous. An aircraft at this altitude can affect ships and planes hundreds of miles away. It does not need to fire a weapon. If it disrupts sensors or communications, it can change decisions in seconds. And in military situations, seconds decide outcomes. For Venezuela, the pressure is political as much as military. Letting an unknown aircraft approach without response makes the government look weak at home. Scrambling fighters shows control, even if the pilots are ordered not to shoot. Every move is watched, not just by the military, but by the public and by allies. For the US, the concern is different. US ships operate under strict rules. They are trained to avoid escalation, but they also cannot allow their crews to be put at risk by unseen threats. When electronic interference appears, commanders must assume the worst until proven otherwise. That forces costly defensive steps, even if no missile is ever launched. This is why experts say events like this are never random. They are tests. Tests of reaction time, tests of restraint, tests of who blinks first when things get uncomfortable. And here is the real question driving tension on both sides. Was this aircraft simply passing through, or was it deliberately measuring how close it could get before triggering a response? That single question changes everything. If you believe the US should respond firmly to protect its forces, press 1. If you think Venezuela was right to challenge and defend its airspace, press 9 and subscribe to stay with us as this story develops. Inside the Barcelona airbase, the situation moves fast. On the main radar screen, the unknown track changes color. That single shift tightens the room. Unknown means risk. No one makes assumptions anymore. A controller reads the data clearly. Heading steady, altitude climbing, speed unchanged, no response to identification calls. The supervisor steps closer, silent, watching the numbers drop. At 2:23 a.m., the first Venezuelan Su-30 takes off. Less than a minute later, the second follows. Both jets climb hard, pushing past Mach 1, turning north over the dark water. The order in the cockpit is simple. Identify visually. Stay close. Do not engage unless threatened. As the fighters climb, the unknown aircraft does not turn away. Instead, it climbs higher, passing 70,000 feet. That move sends a clear signal. This aircraft is not avoiding contact. It is placing itself above the intercept. Then the radar picture begins to change. At coastal stations, light noise grows heavier, lines stretch. One contact briefly splits before snapping back together. Another station reports short signal loss. Not a blackout, but enough to raise concern. In the lead Su-30 cockpit, the pilot attempts radar lock. The tone flickers, then disappears. He tries again, same result. Lock unstable, he reports. Possible interference. On the ground, reports arrive from multiple stations. Same issue, same pattern. Electronic interference is now suspected. At 2:34 a.m., the track reaches the edge of Venezuela's air identification zone. It does not cross deep inside. It skims the boundary, close enough to force a response. Radar marks it red. The room goes quiet. From Caracas, the order is firm. Observe. Record everything. No weapons release. Because firing without a clear picture would be more dangerous than holding fire. One wrong move here could turn a tense intercept into a crisis no one could control. For a brief moment, nothing happens. No shots, no warnings, just engines humming and soft static filling the headsets. Then the tension tightens again. The unknown aircraft begins to accelerate, not sharply, not aggressively, just enough to widen the gap. Its altitude remains high, its path smooth and controlled, as if it knows exactly how far it can push without crossing a clear line. In encounters like this, small changes matter. A few degrees of turn, a few thousand feet of altitude. Each move shifts the balance between control and loss of control. On the Venezuelan side, coastal defense units raise readiness. Missile systems stay cold, but crews take positions. Naval patrol boats move farther out to sea, ordered not to engage, only to watch. The goal is awareness. The problem is, awareness is slipping. Radar interference continues in waves. It never lasts long enough to cause a full blackout, but it is steady enough to wear operators down. Screens blur. Filters are adjusted again and again. Fatigue creeps in, even though the night is still young. Inside the Su-30 cockpits, fuel burn increases as the pilots hold high power. Breathing stays calm, but tension builds. The lead pilot tries another scan, then another. Nothing holds. No solid lock, he reports. The unknown aircraft answers without words. It drifts slightly west, then north, riding the edge of the air identification zone. Close enough to be felt, not close enough to cross. In Caracas, commanders weigh their options quietly, push harder and risk losing control, pull back and appear weak. Neither choice feels safe. Then the interference spikes again. Several stations lose the track at the same moment. When it returns, the aircraft is no longer where it should be. The room falls silent. This is the real danger, not missiles or dogfights, but uncertainty. When sensors lie, decisions turn into guesses. The order comes down once more, slow and deliberate. Observe, record, do not engage. Because now it is clear, this is no longer about one aircraft. It is about who controls the tempo and who is forced to react while the other side moves freely through the night. At first, many believe this is the peak of the incident, a risky intercept, heavy interference. Then the aircraft pulls away and the night begins to calm. That belief does not last long. The real twist does not happen in the air, it happens on the ground. Hours later, analysts review commercial satellite images taken before sunrise. At first, nothing looks unusual. Then a pattern stands out. A normally quiet runway suddenly surrounded by armored vehicles. Lights kept low. Movement fast, controlled, and deliberate. Security teams form a tight perimeter. A small group of personnel in protective gear appears near the aircraft. Sealed containers are moved quickly to waiting transport. This is not routine handling. This is urgency. That detail changes the meaning of the entire night. If this flight was only meant to test reactions, none of this would be necessary. No medical presence, no sealed cargo, no rush. The interference now makes sense. It was not just to confuse radar screens. It was meant to buy time, to keep attention in the sky while something sensitive was moved on the ground. What Venezuelan crews did not know is that they were reacting to a decoy situation. The aircraft overhead was the pressure point. The real objective was completing a transfer without interruption. By the time Caracas begins to connect the dots, the critical phase is already over. The aircraft remains, but whatever mattered most is no longer on board. So here is the question that divides opinion. If you believe this operation crossed a dangerous line, press 1. If you think Venezuela was right to hold fire and avoid escalation, press 9 and subscribe to stay with us as this story heads toward its final phase. The climax does not arrive with noise. It arrives with a pause. For several long seconds, radar rooms across the coast report the same thing. No clean picture, too much noise. The main track flickers, then slips. Controllers stop talking and start listening, waiting for the system to stabilize. In the air, the Su-30 pilots feel the pressure rise. Fuel burn is high. Time on station is shrinking. The lead pilot finally gets a brief visual. Just a dark shape, high and fast, cutting across the night sky. No markings, no lights. Gone almost as soon as it appears. He keys the radio. Visual contact confirmed. High altitude. Speed extreme. The response from the ground is immediate and short. Maintain distance, no engagement. That order hangs heavy in the cockpit. Every pilot trains for the moment when a decision must be made in seconds. This time, the decision is to wait. Then the interference surges one last time. Multiple stations lose the track at once. Not for long, but long enough. 3 seconds. 4. 5. When the picture returns, the aircraft is no longer where the math says it should be. It has changed position cleanly, without warning. On a separate channel, a US naval unit reports intense spectrum pressure, communication strain, sensors feel crowded. An electronic warfare team begins logging data in real time. No panic, just focus, because whatever's happening is deliberate. Back in Caracas, senior commanders face the hardest moment of the night. Fire now with limited visibility and risk hitting the wrong target. Hold fire and accept that the aircraft may leave untouched. The final order comes down, calm but absolute. Do not fire. As if on cue, the unknown aircraft accelerates again. The sound never reaches the ground, only the numbers change. Altitude steady, speed increasing. Then the track fades, not in chaos, but in control. No explosion, no missile trail, just an empty patch of sky where a threat had been moments earlier. In that silence, everyone understands the truth. This was not about a fight. It was about proving the ability to enter, operate, and exit without permission. So here is the question at the heart of this moment. If you believe the US should answer this kind of operation with strength and clear consequences, press 1. If you think restraint prevented something far worse, press 9 and subscribe to stay with us as the aftermath begins to unfold. By sunrise, the skies are quiet again. No alarms, no fighters climbing, but nothing feels normal. Inside Venezuelan command centers, crews replay the night with precision. Radar logs are reviewed, audio channels checked, interference patterns isolated. What could not be stopped must now be understood. The objective is no longer interception, but explanation. Publicly, the response is restrained. Officials speak of vigilance and sovereignty. Air defenses remain on alert. Naval patrols stay at sea. The message is controlled. We saw it. We were ready, and we chose restraint. In Washington, there are no press conferences, only quiet briefings and careful reports. Strong words are avoided because pressure leads to escalation. No shots were fired, but the balance shifted. This incident shows how modern confrontations work. You do not need missiles to force reactions. Control information, jam sensors, create uncertainty, make the other side hesitate. Every delay costs time and confidence. For those involved, this was real. Long minutes watching unreliable screens, orders repeated, decisions weighed twice. For planners, the lesson is clear. Expensive forces can be pressured by quieter tools. A single aircraft, used at the right moment, can push multiple units into defensive posture without crossing a clear red line. The aircraft did not stay. It left when its purpose was complete. This was not a warning. It was a test. The Caribbean returned to calm that morning. Shipping moved, aircraft flew, life continued. But everyone involved knows the truth. This was not the end. It was a rehearsal.